Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kidar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 16 of The Captain's Heart. Gralgiran walked by medical without going in. Alex's condition wouldn't have changed in a day, or he suspected until Jezebelium was satisfied with the situation she'd created, or had allowed to come to be. He was willing to grant a lot to the gods, but for her to have planned this from all the way back when Terexamian had created his people, she would have had to seek out Centerina for that. And the goddess of sight rarely cared to align herself with the one of insanity. Or so the ballads went. Well past the convalescence rooms, he entered the counseling department and headed for the office of the head counselor. He announced his arrival and the door opened. The sense of green took him back to Kelser, the trees at the back of his family's property, running through them with his brother and sister, is Kelsirian cursing his name for pulling his siblings along as she tried to catch up. Captain Leah Tergrobar greeted him, bringing him back to the ship. She glanced at the time displayed on her desk. I appreciate the promptness. He smiled, wondering why she was being being overly formal. Please call me Captain, she interrupted. If you called a meeting to discuss performance, I'd agree to a more casual discussion, as usual. But you asked to see me as a counselor. It's better if we keep clear each of our roles. She motioned for the chair opposite hers. He nodded and sat. The walls were covered with plants, small trees and flowers. Other than the floor, desk, and chairs, no surface was without plants on them. Was without them. Most were transplant from Kelser, but some were plants she'd collected from other races. She'd explained they were primarily to put those seeking her assistance at ease. She'd explain but she had an interest in all plants. I need to learn Earther. She studied him, and he didn't bother attempting to cover his thoughts. Not relating to your hunt, or not this hunt, she corrected. Personal? To enter her office was to agree to expose himself to her. He told Resdiran their friends would know. Come back here. So their friends would know, then others, and he expected soon everyone on the ship would have heard. My heart is an Earther, the engineer. I was under the impression he had been forced on you by the station's commander. I doubt the idea was his. Ah, you suspect meddling, he snorted. I'm well past suspecting at this point. He hesitated. Are you traditionalist? He made no secret of his stance on the gods, but he didn't make a habit of prying into others' belief. Only for this conversation, knowing where the counselor stood would be important. She shook her head. My father's mother was staunchy traditionalist, and he balked at what she taught him. I'm not against the belief the gods meddle, but I prefer looking for how we meddle in our own lives first. Then that Jezebelian or I is behind this, it doesn't change how I feel about Jeremy. And he tilted back in surprise. That is, you do feel for him. He's my heart. What else would I do? I need the ability to talk to him, to understand why he doesn't seem to feel as I do. All I will give you are the words, not the understanding of Earthers. I'm aware. Don't the ballads say that the hearts know one another? She smiled. My grandmother regaled in ignoring my father's demand she never talk about those with me. They do. My mother and father knew each other when they laid eyed, knew one another. Knew one another when they laid eyed on each other. Jeremy is an earther. Maybe their gods are meddling in that. I won't know unless I can talk with them. You should be able to have full conversations after the third session, so long as it's kept to simpler words and concept. I would suggest waiting until you've had all sixth before attempting to discuss the gods. He nodded, and she stepped out from behind her desk to take the seat next to him. They faced each other, and she pushed her fingers through his trimmed mane until they touched his temple. Is touch required? He asked. The literature about language imprinting doesn't mention it. I am stronger when touching the person I'm assisting. It allows the sessions to be shorter, although I must warn you that it will not help with the aphasia that will follow. Your mind will still need time to reorder itself. Then I'll hope the gods can keep from meddling until I can curse them properly. My grandmother would be horrified at the idea you'd dare do that. Gralgiran smiled. As their hunter, I like to think I'm granted certain liberties when it comes to voicing my opinions. Then maybe you should consider if voicing them is related to how much they meddle in your life. They can go. The word wouldn't come. He couldn't even think of it. He knew what he intended to say. He could envision just Billiam and Salmili performing the act, but as hard as he tried, he couldn't find what it was called. Anytime he tried to find a word, it burst apart and wouldn't come back together. It was like when there was a sound at the edge of his hearing, except that he couldn't move closer, so it would resolve itself into something he recognized. The tap on his lap made him focus on the counselor. Meaningless sounds left her mouth. He tried to ask her to repeat herself, to use words, but he couldn't find them himself. This was the aphasia she'd mentioned. Wait, did I? Yeah, I accidentally. Well, this should not be capitalized. This was the aphasia she'd mentioned. It was rather disconcerting. She searched his face, then nodded. The session was clearly done. He stood and left her office. He sat in the chair, took out his tablet, and read while listening to the general feed so he'd know when his language center was working again. The quartermaster's domain wasn't quite in the bow of the ship, but to have access to the stock it contained, it had to be just about there. Gralgiran always felt like he was entering a different world when he came here, the world of the underside of the stations, where deals were made by those who didn't follow the laws. It wasn't. It was a ship. It hadn't felt like it wasn't. It was still a ship, but it hadn't felt like this under the previous quartermaster, and only that had happened. And the only thing that had happened when the female decided to return to Kelser was that he'd found a replacement with contacts on that side of the station. Nothing about his ship had changed, he told himself as he entered the room. Captain! Zenial exclaimed in surprise, then looked around in worry. What can I do for you? Of course, the fact that his quartermasters always looked like he'd been found with blood on his claws when Gralgiran showed up unannounced didn't help the impression this part of the ship was no longer his. I need to know the status of our... The word slipped away. Food. That was the one that his claws had sunk in, and it would do. Although, it wasn't the one he'd been hunting for. He'd been hunting. The commander has refused to trade. They can't do that, the Greyford mail said. The treaties grant anyone who docks at station the right to supplies. Supplies, that was the word he'd wanted. The Earthers haven't joined the Federation yet, and this isn't a trade station. I need to know how long we can stay before the civilians will feel the effect. Xeniel sat on the counter. Counted? Really? And swung his leg over so he'd keep facing Gralgiran. I wasn't told we'd be stranded some place where we wouldn't be able to engage in good trade, so I didn't know I needed to ensure we had supplies to last until this little hunt of yours was over. The accusatory look was almost comical on the quartermaster. I'm not in the habit of telling someone not involved in the hunt what is happening. You mean at Tahalan? Xeniel said casually, swiping at his tablet. No one knew about the hunt until someone pried it out of one of my hunters. Well, when the ship crosses into disputed territory, you have to expect people to ask questions. Gralgiran's breathed down his annoyance. He'd wanted someone who did things differently. This was the cost. We have 2 months worth of food and overall supplies for repairs and the like. We can add a month if you start rationing the crew right now. We can triple that if you ration the civilians, but I'd expect people to show up at your office and for explanations. Gralgiran frowned. That can't be right. When I looked at the numbers, they weren't that high. I wouldn't have needed to come down here if I'd gotten those numbers. Must be something wrong with the reporting system then. You should have repairs look into it. No. If you didn't resupply at this last station, like you said, we would be closer to 2 weeks. Did I say I didn't resupply the ship? He quickly swiped, searching. You said that without knowing where the hunt would take us, you had no reason to do that. Right, I did say that. The Tahalan grinned. Then my namesake must have been wandering the ship because I happened to get really good prices on just about everything we'd need for a trip of an undetermined length. You knew, Gralgiran growled. Me? How could I? I'm just a lowly quartermaster. He never stopped grinning. Gralgiran sighed. Who talked? He finally asked. No one on the ship, Daniel answered, all humor leaving him. I'm also not the one who spread the information on the hunt. You're Tahalan, Xeniel. One of you never holds on to information. One of us always holds on to information, Gral. Unless there's money to be made. Who on your ship is going to risk paying for information on what you're doing? Do you know who spread it? I do. The grin returned. I'm not paying, Quartermaster. Xeniel shrugged. Nothing I can tell you then. He swung and dropped back on his side of the counter. Can I do anything else for you, Gral? Showing me some respect would be appreciated, Gralgiran grumbled. But this is me showing you respect. You should see how me and my siblings treated our captain. Wasn't your previous captain your mother? You say that like it means anything. Sometimes Gralgiran wondered if the Tahalan might not be an entirely different species. Have you made any headway in contacting your counterpart on the station? No. The smaller male looked unhappy. I'm starting to think there isn't one. You told me it's a law of space that every station has someone like your clan on it. And your namesake seems to be getting off on proving me wrong. I've sent the signals, dropped the hints where there's money to be made, and no one even scratched at it. The language difference? Xeniel shook his head. Trade is its own language, and I know the Earthers engage in it because one of my Kelsirian's brother has done trade with the Earthers before. If there was one here, they'd have let me know. If they scratch, I'd appreciate it if you let me know. If you told me. I appreciate it if you told me. Why, Captain? said, and Gralgiran winced at the mocking tone. Am I going to make a Tahalan out of you after all? No, he almost started a response. But a hunter uses all weapons at his disposal to accomplish his hunt. The quartermaster smiled. If they make themselves known, I will tell you. Gralgiran studied the Greyford mail. I'm starting to understand why your mother left you among those bandits where I found you. And I can just imagine her disappointment when she came back, expecting me to beg to be taken back in, and found all those bodies, except mine. He turned and laughed. Not Gralgiran. Okay, what just happened here? Oh, okay, I see you've twisted so that my finger's not lined up. Wait. Okay, am I twisting in the wrong direction? Oh, yeah. Gralgiran turned and left. He tapped the name on his tablet. Tom, are you busy? Just running through combat simulation? I just had to deal with the quartermaster and I need a shower. You want to help? I'll be there by the time you get to your quarters, his friend said between peals of laughter. And that concludes chapter 16 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is up on Ream Story. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.